We need to set up a meeting.
A lot of people slip. I'm glad nobody got hurt, but
call the meeting to order. Would all who wish join me in the pledge of allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I don't think we had any recommended agenda adjustments. The one thing that I think we may, and we may want to just wait and discuss this as we get closer, but we had postponed the board professional development because we were missing somebody last week and now we're missing somebody this week. So my sense is we might want to postpone that again. Anybody have a strong opinion? We could do that now, or we could just wait till we get to that topic and see.
I would think we should postpone it. Doesn't matter to me whether we postpone it now or postpone it later.
All right, I would make a motion to adjust the agenda to drop item 15 for tonight.
Come on, a second.
Any further discussion or agenda adjustments? All those in favor of dropping 15? Okay. Next up, we had minutes. I would make a motion to approve the minutes from September 6th as presented. Is there a second?
Another second.
Any discussion or corrections? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. I would make a motion to approve the minutes from September 20th as presented. Is there a second?
My second.
Any discussion or corrections? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. I would make a motion to approve regular warrants 8 and 9, payroll warrants 8 and 9, main purse for September, and ban warrant 28. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. We are now open for public comment. Is there anybody who would like to make a public comment?
I don't see anyone in the public other than those who have to be here, so.
Yeah. Not seen anybody jumping to make a public comment. We'll go ahead and move to acknowledgements. Jake.
Nothing at this time, thank you.
I think I passed two.
It's been a while since I've been here. I feel like I had something to say last time. I think last time I was gonna thank Asa Elementary for a really great open house, but that was forever ago. But I still, Maddie and Carrie, I'll thank you. That was a really wonderful time. Even though it was quite a while ago now.
No, but it's still worth acknowledging. Yeah.
All right, nothing this time. Thank you.
First, I want to acknowledge a donation. We have a Donors Choose donation coming. That was something that Cammie Carter set up for a core program, and they are donating chessboards for something they're doing for outreach. I want to acknowledge Susan Smith for organizing and executing a great PD day on October 7th. It was a very productive and beneficial day. So thank you, Susan, for your efforts around that. And I want to acknowledge the town of Orono and specifically the Orono PD and Chief Lowe and Sear Bus for working with us to try to improve traffic flow, particularly with middle and high school traffic flow. That's all.
Great. Next up, we have reports. Start at ASA.
Yes, good evening, everyone. So Kevin, thank you for the acknowledgement about the open house. And actually, that's the first thing that I was going to start with. The open house on September 22nd, and I do apologize for barking in the background. I have a very rambunctious 2-year-old lab that wants to play with their siblings, not me. Piper, hush. So on September 22nd, we had the majority of ASA families in attendance. Maddie did a little bit of data collection, and most of the teachers said that they had maybe 1 or 2 families that did not attend. So that's an enormous amount of people that was flowing through the building. They were so incredibly excited to be there, and our students were incredibly excited to be able to give their families tours of the building, because so many of these families had never been to many of the classrooms in our school. So families were equally as excited to see this year's classroom and meet this year's teacher in person as they were to go back and see last year's classrooms and have conversations with last year's teachers. So it was incredibly exciting. There was so much excitement in the air. And as you saw from the photo that I added in my board report, even though it was raining that evening, we had many families that took advantage of the Darlings ice cream truck that the PTO had requested to come. So it was just a very, very nice evening for families, and we were excited to have so many people in the building. In addition to other exciting things that have been happening at ASA, we had Mrs. Moore, who planned a school-wide field trip on September 30th. We took all students in kindergarten to grade 5 to the Step Africa performance at the Collins Center. The students, even though many of them had never been on a field trip before, they did an amazing job following expectations and being very gracious audience members. Several of our students made comments about this was their very first time on a school bus, which is for a lot more students than you would actually expect, where during COVID, many of them had parent drop off and pickup than in past years. So that was a really exciting field trip for our students as well. Keeping with that theme, tomorrow we have the international students from UMaine coming to visit with students in grades 3, 4, and 5. They're planning presentations about their countries of origin, and they're also excited to learn from our students about what our country and our state is like in this local region. We're hoping that the international students in the next phase of the trip will be able to visit in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade classrooms the next time around. As far as professional development, I'll just note that the staff really took advantage of the in-district development that Susan planned. And that was a really wonderful opportunity for staff to connect with one another on their journey in their process of becoming more culturally proficient, and what that means for our school and our students. And I'll just finally comment on staff meetings so far this school year. Our staff meetings have been focusing on habits of mind, which sort of fall in line with social emotional learning and teaching those kinds of behaviors that we want students to be able to have at school so that they can be successful. And this is something that the staff at ASA, who are veteran staff, are very familiar with. So they're dusting off those books and pulling them out and thinking about the things that they have done in previous years. But we're also combining that with all the new staff we have at ASA and helping to onboard them. And Ms. West is a very integral part of that work, as she was the first time ASA implemented the work around habits of mind. So habits of mind have been a big piece of our staff development so far. And that's all I will share for tonight.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Go ahead and move to the middle school with Richard.
Good evening, everyone. Lots going on here this fall. Feels really good to be back to like more of a normal school year this year, and I think that's playing out with we're able to add back in guest speakers and field trips and kind of those great things that those enriching things that we've been able to offer. And so on that front, I'm pleased to note that our outing club has organized their first meeting. In fact, that was today, and we're looking at taking our outing club on their annual hiking trip before the end of the month. We've had a number of scientists visit us from the University of Maine. Many thanks to Katie Quirk for her legwork here. We're going to have 4 scientists interviewed by students and answer questions and you know, just provide general information about what they do. And so we have our second of 4 coming up in the very near future. Second of 4 this semester. And what else do we have going on? We had Riot Cookery and Riot Buddies is up and running. We had a Riot Cookery today, in fact. Many thanks to Jess Archer for her work there. she really seeks to engage students who and bring students together who wouldn't otherwise normally come together and enjoy a meal after preparing it and learning a lot of things. So the group met today and everyone headed home with some food. So that was a nice thing going on today. We had a recent diversity and equity presentation from Anila Karanekar from the University of Maine, and she is the director of diversity and inclusion. She met with our 7th and 8th graders on October 4th in the new PAC, and that was again, nice to get people back into our building and helping us to educate kids on important things. One thing that I'm looking forward to this year, we had one already, and our next one kicks off on October 25th. We're trying something new this year, and following the lead of Meredith and Sam at the high school, who piloted some parent advisory meetings last year. So we're taking that on this year. We have one scheduled for each month, and our second meeting is next week, October 25th. Topics of discussion are OMS communications, what works and what doesn't. And so we're looking to make some adjustments there. We're going to talk about winter sports planning, what things we need to, adjustments we need to make for winter sports. And I want to get feedback from parents on future topics of interest that we can bring to future parent advisory meetings. So those are a couple of topics that we're looking at. Let's see, what else we have? Professional development. In fact, tomorrow we have a staff meeting, and we're going to be taking another look at our student success plan. The OMS plan is currently based on the OHS model. And however, we're doing a little differently. We have an electronic form that we're trying out with students. And so we're going to look at it and make some tweaks tomorrow, and hope to get students to complete the student success plans at the early and second quarter. So that's coming right up. And we have fall sports is wrapping up. Hopefully next week. We've had a lot of challenges with weather and scheduling venues and just collaboration between our 9 schools in PVML as we developing our schedule for our championships in soccer and our final meets and those types of things. So I know we've had a lot of changes to our schedule recently, but there's been a lot of factors there. And so tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with league officials, and we're going to hopefully wrap up and finalize our playoff schedules for soccer next week. That's the plan on that front. And also, I wanted to note that we wrapped up fall NWA assessments, with the exception of a few makeup tests that we've been picking off this week. So that the rollout of the administration of the assessment went very well. No technical glitches in particular, and it seemed to run pretty smooth this time around. And that's what I have at this time.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Next up, the high school.
Hi, everybody. We at the high school too, as everyone says, it's been really great and busy last couple of months since we last saw you. We included our enrollment because even as of Friday, so after we tallied these numbers for this report, we actually had another new student come. So we're really excited that our student body continues to grow in many areas and welcome many new students, even up until last week. We had our first homecoming in years that felt like a true homecoming. We were able to celebrate things that we've done in the recent past, such as like minute to win it activities and dress up days. But we also were still able to do the donuts, the hallway decoration, having a huge bonfire, and our first all school pep rally was really truly an amazing experience for the kids and the staff. And it really reinvigorated our culture and brought back some of the traditions that people love so much about being a Red Riot. So thanks to everybody, because it was many people, but thanks to everyone who made that experience so amazing for everyone involved. We also wanted to, as we get close to the end of October, beginning of November, we know that sports seasons are wrapping up, and there's already a few students that we wanted to recognize with you. For our Orono High School girls cross country team, they earned 3rd place, finished at the Festival of Champions. And junior Ruth White broke her own course and the festival record with a time of 17:27. She's incredibly fast, if you didn't already know. And also Ellis Spalding, he finished in 11th in the Class C State Golf Championships. I think it was 2 weekends or maybe last weekend. Additional to that, our math team had their very first competition of this year at Brewer High School on Wednesday. 10 students participated, and we're currently in 6th place and in the state, in 8th place in our league. And Beckett O'Reilly, who is one of our new students to us this year, is tied in 33rd place. So very exciting stuff. And they do have another math meet coming up that we are actually going to host here at Orono. And our awards committee meeting, continue just to be impressed with that group. We continue to meet to evaluate how we give out awards and what awards we give out and the reasons as to why, plus the kind of the criteria and protocols into which students are selected for those. And we will have another meeting coming up to look at some feedback from staff as into the value in which some of those awards hold for our students and staff and community. With our families, as Richard mentioned, we are looking forward to our next parent advisory group next week. Our topics will be the student success plans as well as win-win, and just get hopefully some feedback from families as to what they're hearing from their students or what they themselves feel in the changes to those that we've added this year at the high school. And this evening, I actually just signed off on a conference right at 6 o'clock to join you, but we had our parent teacher conferences yesterday and today. Many parents and guardians signed up to meet with their teachers. We did it virtually. The feedback we've heard thus far has been very positive, and we look forward to touch base with our staff soon to figure out how they felt it went, and hopefully they thought the experience was invigorating for them as well as our students and families. And just a big shout out to our 2 school counselors this year. I actually got to participate as a parent, which was a new and terrifying experience for me. But they held a wonderful FAFSA night where once again, many families came and got reps from Finance Authority of Maine and Eastern Maine Community College Financial Aid Office to help fill out the FAFSA and help parents navigate that as their child prepares for the next step. And finally, from me, we'd also like to just thank Karen Martin for her efforts once again in organizing a flu shot for the OMS and OHS students and community members and staff last week, or actually 2 weeks ago now. And then we do have she also has done a COVID vaccine that's coming up on the 28th. And just the fact that she works hard to make those things so available to all of us really is a great thing for us. And it makes it much easier for families to make that choice for their students without having to worry about traveling or time constraints. So thank you very much, Karen. Meredith?
Thank you, Sam. So something that Sam mentioned was the homecoming that we had recently, and the air at that event, at the bonfire, at the pep rally, was particularly joyful. And when I thought about it afterward, I think that it in some ways represents the point that we're at the high school, maybe at some of the other schools as well, where we have all traveled this course over the past few years that has brought with it challenge after challenge, and that has meant that our students have so much about the traditions and the history of this place, this school, and American high school in general that was unfamiliar. And seeing them at these events, I think, illustrated both the joy that you would expect, but also the joy that comes only from knowing what life can be like without these things. And the meeting of a new reality that is somehow sharper and better because of the reality of the recent past. And I think that that same thing is true for a lot of the academic work that is happening here now. We have, thanks to Susan, started conversations about our math and our health curriculum that are informed by the trajectory that we have followed the past 2 years and some of the challenges that teachers and students have faced, and also a sense of why it is so important to get these things right, as demonstrated by student feedback, family feedback, and some of the data that we have. We also recently took delivery of our final NEASC collaborative conference report, which in some ways was written in that same spirit of, well, this is where we've been and this is where we hope to go. And now comes the time to begin thinking about what that road ahead should look like in a way that deviates from tradition in or through the insights that we have collected. One of the identified priorities is the cultivation of a vision of a graduate, which is something that we have talked about at the district level as an endeavor that really belongs in the K or pre-K 12 realm, not just here at the high school. And so that work for us is going to begin, excuse me, I'm just going to close my door real quick. That work for us is going to begin with a cross-district team attending a 2-day workshop, November 16th and 17th, sponsored by NEASC, that is intended to inform and support districts who are undergoing the work of developing a vision of the graduate. That is something that we are able to do here at the high school in a way that is being informed by things that are currently underway, right? Like Richard talked about OMS's burgeoning implementation of student success plans. We are 3/4 of a quarter through our initial use of these plans. And I think in keeping with truly inquiry-driven best practice and community commitment, we have developed these plans. Students are working on them in their advisories, and in conversations with faculty, sometimes the question is, well, what are we going to do with these? Like when we have them, like what are we supposed to be doing with them? And the response that I've been given, or that I've been giving, and that I've heard echoed in other contexts is, well, what might we do with them? I was in a couple of meetings over the past couple of days, wherein teachers talking about students were able to do so in a way that demonstrated their understanding of a student through the student success plan, not in a way that betrayed its contents, but in a way that really was able to root the specifics about the student in the context of what their personal hopes and dreams were and what their personal path might look like. And that is one manifestation, I think, of what is possible with these plans, alongside many, many others that are going to reveal themselves to us over the coming months. That is something that is happening alongside our parent-teacher conferences, our NWEA administration, our PSAT administration last week, our SAT administration next week. And it's just really exciting to see how we are making the best of both of these worlds, both the one that we get to live now that we are moving to the other side of this, and the one that is informed by what we understand about ourselves and each other because of what we've been through together.
Great. Any questions or comments? I mean, I know the middle school and high school are both working on these, but I think the student success plans is a really exciting thing going forward. I just think there's a lot of opportunity for, at an organizational level transformation, and at the individual student level meeting student needs. So I think that's a really exciting development. It doesn't necessarily have an acronym or something that we all recognize attached to it, but I think that's a really exciting step going forward. Seeing no other comments or questions, we'll go ahead and move on to the superintendent report.
Thank you. I want to just follow up on the email I sent soon after our last meeting, I believe, where I shared the awards list with the board. So you've received that listing. And as Sam mentioned, high school's continuing discussion about this. I know I saw this topic on the middle school agenda. So that was the list of awards and everything that we knew about the awards at the time that I sent it out. So it's I think an ever evolving topic right now. And along those same lines, I closed the survey today. We indicated in the survey communication that the survey was going to be available through yesterday. So I closed it today. Brian is working on a report of that information. And do you want to say anything about that now, or just?
I was just gonna cross tab it, break it out, student versus parent versus staff.
Right, so we'll be bringing that to the next meeting, but I think our intention was to provide that to board members prior to the next meeting. So I would say, what's today, Tuesday, probably by top of next week, we would have that information out to board members.
Brian, do you know roughly what the end was?
267. It was quite good. Pretty healthy chunk of students, in particular, more students than we've ever had. I think the students were 65 or 70.
Okay.
And the staff was mostly high school staff, about 30, if I remember, and the remainder were parents. So about 150 parents. Pretty more middle school and high school, but some ASA parents too. So yeah, if memory serves, it might be our best return so far. And we'll look at it in detail. I'd say there's a pretty strong. I haven't done the analysis myself by cross tabs and things, but there seemed to be a pretty clear message. So
circling back to a topic we talked about a couple meetings ago, Bill and I are going back to the planning board tomorrow night to have them approve an update to our site plan regarding removal of the shed. And we are seeking removal of the stipulation that we're responsible for screening, since there's going to be nothing there to screen.
So we didn't cut anything down.
That's tomorrow night, sorry.
And we didn't cut anything down.
Right, so I mean, they had acknowledged that at the last meeting, there was acknowledgement from the town that was part of their project. So I don't anticipate any, issue with that. I think it's just a formality, but we're going to be there in case there are any questions that need to be answered. Also, I mentioned acknowledgements about the crossing guard issue, and what the media really likes that topic, right? So there've been 2 stories on the crossing guard issue, and I feel like depending on the day, some days it's worse than others. Other days, there aren't as many issues. I feel like it's at a sustainable kind of point right now. The guard has been trained to be able to allow traffic flow to move out of Westwood when the individual has already stopped traffic for a pedestrian or a biker. So there is opportunity there for the crossing guard to do that, and I believe that's helping some. Also, the bus change of having them exit in the afternoon down Goodrich has really helped relieve afternoon traffic. We'll see more traffic pickup after fall sports season's in, because when students are leaving at the end of the day, that's the time of year that we see more congestion in the afternoon. So it'll be really interesting to see what the afternoon looks like. But having the buses not in that mix, I mean, that's like 7 buses that are exiting here in the afternoon, and that's a significant load off of it to have them going out the other way. So I feel like it's in a good place. And, frankly, I just hope we can keep this crossing guard, right, employed, because it's an important service, and having that person there is it's a better solution than the police department having to do it, because they're shorthanded too and can't always be there. And it more reliably has someone at that post. Any questions about that issue? I know that.
I don't read the newspaper. What do they write about when it appears?
Because I sent a message to the school community, someone contacted them about it. And, people want to, I got quite a few questions about why don't we put a traffic light there, so I responded to that. So they were just wondering, the media, about why we've had an issue with the crossing guard and what's going on up there in Orno with crossing guards. And, it's really workforce shortage, and the fact that that's not a very desirable post because of the traffic congestion there is really difficult at times. So, the Bangor Daily picked it up, and then a news station, I think it was ABI, saw the Bangor Daily article, so then they wanted to do a story on it. So I deflected all of that to the town because they hire the crossing guard, right? It's not, they're not unemployed. The town also is in charge of deciding what the crossing guard does in that role, not us. So the town really, the police department really needed to take the lead on that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that I'm ready to say that it's sustainable at this point. I think we'll have to wait and see. I also think we need to acknowledge, in addition to this being a town responsibility, there's also a certain amount of state responsibility here because they couldn't get their act together to repair a bridge in Old Town, which has diverted a huge amount of traffic through Main Street in Orono. So perhaps it might be time for the town to enlist our fine state representation in seeking out some kind of a solution on this. So
Yeah, and that was part of the news article that the town, acknowledged as a contributing factor to traffic congestion. Our traffic congestion is really limited to a couple of times a day, or after big events. And in the morning, it can, conflicts with a major traffic congestion time for the university. And it's really just the middle high school. The ASA traffic is not quite as bad as the middle high school traffic is. Which makes sense. We have more students here combined, and they're all starting at roughly the same time every day. So it's just a bigger load coming in and out of the campus.
At least with
The
ASA,
student drivers as well.
at least with ASA, you have two options, right? You can come up the hill and go out this
Yeah.
way, or
That's right. That's right. I also wanted to, sticking with the good news front, give you a field update. We continue to inquire about the status of the field redo. Currently, they are going back and forth with the lab to try to get the mix just right. We were told October 1st it would start, and then when they didn't start, we inquired, and it was they were still having to work on the mix. We've had several rounds of those kind of inquiries and answers, and the current answer is next week. So we'll see if next week they come out, but they don't want to do, I think I mentioned this last time, they want to do it all at once. They don't want to do excavation and then fill. They want to do it simultaneous so they can, bring a truck in with material, take that same truck out filled with the material that's leaving, because they're doing all new material in the field. And they seem to still feel like it's doable, weather contingent, to get, it out and in, but we shall see.
roughly how far down are they moving?
6 inches,
6.5 inches, 6 inches,
Mhm.
6.5.
6 plus the sod.
So, I think we'll all know when it starts because we'll see the parade of trucks coming through. But that's, we want them to get the mix right. It's frustrating that it's taking so long to get the mix right. So we're monitoring and poking, inquiring to try to get updates, and that's the most recent one. So, anything, Bill, Brian, to add to that?
That's pretty much it.
Sam already mentioned the COVID booster clinic, but just for anyone listening or others, people do need to sign up for that. There was a form that was sent out. You don't sign up for a time, you just have to send us, respond on the form that you or your children are interested in, talking staff or children, and it is for 12 and up, this clinic. The October 7th PD, someone mentioned that. I think maybe several people mentioned that in their principal reports. I think I mentioned before, we had almost half of the day on trauma-informed practices, and the other half of the day on DEI equity work. And it was really a productive day. And it really is helping to move us forward on a number of fronts that we'll talk about in the DEI action plan approval agenda item. But I want to just acknowledge also Ben and team did a nice lunch for everyone. So that's greatly appreciated as well. And it was nice to use the auditorium for that day again. It's just, you know, a space that works really well for those kinds of needs and presentations. So I continue to be really excited with that space, and you can see that I'm now using it as my backdrop for meetings, and it's a space that I think we're all proud of. Finally on my list is it's the time of year where we just completed the October 1 enrollment submissions to the state. We haven't certified them yet. We're waiting on just a few more updates from the state that they had to correct some things for us. But I will be bringing that data to you at the November 1st meeting, where you can kind of see, you know, all the data points that we submit. And one data point that I was particularly pleased to see, because I think it's a more accurate reflection of reality, is our free and reduced lunch counts have gone back to a more typical level where we saw them before the pandemic. And that's really great, because it helps not only the state recover more money to help fund the free lunch for all program from the federal government, if they can get more federal money to support that, but it helps us because it boosts our eligibility for more federal funds that are based on those numbers. So good work on the part of the team, administrators, food service director, and office staff to get those, and tech was a big part of at the middle high school, helping collect forms as well, to get those forms in. And that's all for my board report. Anything
Any
else?
questions or comments? Okay, next up, we have MESBA resolutions. So as you probably know, MESBA is Maine School Board Association. So MESBA and Maine School Management, MSMA includes MSBA, which is the Maine School Board Association, and MSSA, the Maine School Superintendents Association. That's the conference coming up in a couple of weeks. But one of the things the School Board Association does is we have an annual meeting, one representative per school board. So Arno has the same voice as Portland, goes and we vote on a policy document, which is, it's basically a statement of positions of the School Board Association. It's used heavily by there's basically a lobbyist that's hired by MSMA. And, you know, this is used to say, see this as the support of the school boards across the state and so forth. And so there's a standing policy document. You oftentimes I've only brought the new proposals. However, whoever's doing the policy committee at the MESBA level has been fairly diligent and gone through the whole document with a fine-tooth comb. So there's a lot of small changes. So the way this works is I talk with the board to make sure I understand the board's positions on things. I do not, you know, we don't have a vote and there's not a binding recommendation for me, because lots of times I show up and somebody amends the motion and it can completely change the nature of the motion and so forth. So I mean, you guys are empowering me to use best judgment in the moment based on what the resolution is in the moment. But I certainly, you know, if there were a clear consensus on the board, unless the resolution completely changed its meaning, I would represent this board So that said, I just wanted to get feedback. I don't know how many of these, I don't know how many of these we want to discuss of the edits. So administration of medication, a lot of these are just cleaning things up.
One thing that I see that I'm not really sure what I feel about it, or how I feel about it, is under state assessments.
Yeah.
To add social studies and civics. And I understand why there's a school of thought to add that in there. But I generally think adding more state assessments is not necessarily a
Yes,
great answer to promoting education in those subjects. So I'm not sure how I feel about that.
yeah, I had just a moment, when we saw 9, 10, and 11 taking them to ES too, which I haven't in the past. Yeah, I think that's a good point. We already do the ELL math and science assessments, but social studies. I mean, on the one hand, civics is a very important area, but on the other hand, I'm not sure in the WIA type test is
Right.
really getting towards what we want for civics. So any other thoughts on the board about that?
Do we know the motivation? Whatever it is.
What you test is, more certainly a part of curriculum.
So we continue to do social studies short shrift on that testing. I think it's ridiculous that we don't assess, to be perfectly blunt, compare and reassess the others, then why wouldn't we assess this?
Well, that's a fair point, I guess.
Are we making a statement that civics is less important than math, science, or English? That seems to me to be the statement that's being made if you're gonna
Yeah.
assess those three and not the other.
I think that's why it's been added, but why not health PE? Why not? Yeah, where do you stop? But I just am of the school of thought that more state assessments does not equal, great instruction, but yeah, but I think Mark's point is probably why it's been added.
Yeah, I would suspect.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a process of people lobbying and adding science in about 8 years ago. It used to be just math and ELL. Richard, did you have a thought?
I was just muting because I noticed I was unmuted, but I agree with Mark. I think, that's been kind of a thorn in my side for years, right? Like that it seems to be send the wrong message that we test in certain areas and not in others.
So I don't know, but very often the issues kind of split upstate, downstate. Wouldn't be surprised if the social studies inclusions is an upstate, downstate split, but not that that's necessarily here nor there for where this board wants to do it. I hear a strong opinion from Mark. Any other thoughts?
I see both sides. I'm not a big fan of testing either, but I do think it's unfair that they prioritize things like mathematics over social studies and civics, which, yeah, I definitely argue are more important than algebra skills, given the civic engagement of our country.
Yeah.
But whether testing does that or not is a meritorious point as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same place. I mean, to be perfectly honest, and I say this as a professional scientist, I almost would rather get rid of the science and just go back to math and reading. ELL is what we're testing, but I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think through. I do feel like there's been a lot more curriculum effort that's gone into science since we started testing science. I don't know if the teaching's gotten better or worse. It's not a criticism of the teaching, but when I think about what's the energy I've seen that's come from testing science, which has more or less happened since I've gotten on the board, seems like there's been a lot more curriculum attention to science, and I don't know that I know how that's rippled down to the teaching or the students for science. Jake, any thoughts?
No, I'm kind of with Kevin, right? I see both sides of it. But to Meredith's point too, where do you stop?
Yeah,
The health, Spanish, French.
yeah. All right, well, I don't think that's a hill I'm gonna die on either way, but
Shayna had a thing in the chat here.
oh, okay. High school social studies department chair is okay with not being tested. We have enough testing, and that gives us the flexibility to design our curriculum and focus and local needs, there is a US history requirement.
That's the state requirement in the graduation standards, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All I can tell you is the students that I see come into my intro to American government classroom are incredibly ill prepared in any kind of civics education. And anything that can improve that level of athletic preparation would be all right.
Brian, are you maybe implying that if something is prioritized, the testing that maybe opens up grant opportunities or other professional development opportunities that may have happened with science? Like what gets funded and how it gets funded. If suddenly it's tested, then it's important because schools are assessed as being poorly, and so then money gets rerouted. Is that a potential benefit of something unpleasant like testing?
Yeah, I think it makes the schools at a, administrative level pay attention. And, that goes into training, curriculum, all the things that kind of our district level impacts. I don't know, any of our administrators who watched the science testing roll in over time have an opinion on how that's changed things on the ground for students on science?
Honestly, it doesn't seem to have had an impact. The role of testing is only as significant as your ability to make sense of the data and process it with teachers in a way that then allows it to translate into practice. And, our delays in getting state data about science testing are significant. The format of the test has changed in a way that makes it difficult to adapt with respect to, implementing that kind of assessment in the building and, just to get the, reliable data from the start. One of our, I think, one of the benefits of the pivot to NUIA has been that it is a long-standing and an extremely well-funded and researched instrument that we have been able to translate to, this purpose. And, the reality is that developing an assessment that gives real insights on this kind of a scale is typically not something that is, successfully done on the state level. And when you have, changing requirements, changing standards, changing leadership, even when you're talking about, 10-year windows, NUIA has been a success, I think, in part because it's been in place and research for a lot longer than, any single standard adaptation or adoption. And so I am not optimistic, Mark, I'm sorry, about the role that assessment could play in changing what you're seeing in your students.
Just to your point, Meredith, a lot of the science curriculum did happen at a national level with next gen science standards. I mean, we had a school board member, Michelle Smith, who was active in that, but it was a national effort more than a state effort. As far as I know, there's no move for NUIA to, they have a science component, but there's no move to add a social studies component, right? So, yeah, okay, complicated. Legislative mandates, please don't give us unfunded mandates from the legislature. That's pretty hard to argue with. Yeah, good luck.
Right.
Actually getting the legislature to respect that request, but I don't know, the longer I've been around education, there's just these, the legislature passes the law, it doesn't give you any more money. And the teachers, I increasingly believe with justification, roll their eyes and wonder how long until it's repealed. So I think if the state really means their business about something, they have to put money behind it. I didn't notice anything with the CTE. There have been some controversial things. This was actually one of the huge fights within MESBA 2 or 3 years ago, because we have a very efficient CTE that runs within the state budget, and the downstate CTEs were getting more money, and so there was a fight about the formula. But I didn't see anything in this language that affects the formula. I think that's been resolved fairly. So alternative certification. certainly as a board member, I personally support the notion that we need flexibility on hiring teachers and certification, so I favored this language. And similarly with teacher preparation, I didn't see anything that jumped out at me. And the last one was deleting an entire section on crime, violence, and discipline. Looks like that, well, that was last changed, it's mostly from the 80s and 90s when crime was a fairly hot political issue. I assume, I don't really know the motivation behind dropping that, but
It says that they're covered in other resolutions, I think, so maybe it's just a,
yeah,
those are more updated than this one is.
yeah, I think that's reasonable. So then we get to the new resolutions. The first one, D, well, the first one under D is to, as you may know, the state passed a law a couple of years ago requiring a public comment period at all school board meetings. They don't require it at town councils. There's some weird asymmetries there, but there is a requirement now in the law, but the law was written narrowly to only require opening public comment to residents and taxpayers of the community. And MESBA is saying it should, as our policy already says, so this doesn't affect us, but it's saying that the law should require being open to residents and taxpayers, students and family, and employees of the school. So I certainly would support that, and our policy already supports that broader participation.
I would kind of urge them to define immediate family in that policy if they push it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Don't necessarily need somebody who's great at it.
No.
Weigh in.
Or siblings for that matter, to be perfectly blunt.
Yeah,
I would be in support of living with parents or guardians.
yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Next one is just kind of, I'm not sure what the impact of this is going to be, because this is basically a request to the US Congress to update the IDEA, which is basically the Special Education Act, to update it and to fully fund it. It's hard to argue against that. This feels like spitting into the wind for the Maine School Board to ask the US Congress to do something when they can't do anything, but certainly don't oppose it. Free and reduced lunch. This is the same thing. It's asking the US Congress to do something, which is to use the area-based income instead of a federal standard for poverty to define the base eligibility for free and reduced lunch. I don't think there's anything to object there, but I don't know that it's going to change anything. And again, a plea to the US government to fund the Universal School Meals Program. I think we all saw it during COVID. That was one of those things where we did something different during COVID and everybody was like, we should be doing this for the rest of the time. So, I support it, but it's asking US Congress to do that. And another one, again, directed at the US Congress to basically to allow employees to draw Social Security instead of being forced into PERS, which is the state retirement system. And having had a spouse who was in Social Security and then started teaching, was forced into PERS, and it's a mess. I would fully support if the US law change that lets people stay in the Social Security if they're coming in from Social Security. But I don't know if anybody have a thought on any of those? Nope. Okay, seems pretty straightforward then. Staff hiring, I think we just have the co-curriculars, so I would make a motion to adopt the slate of co-curriculars as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Just to read it into the record, middle school lunch supervisor number 2, Steve Van Dolman, middle school show choir, Dan Perkins, middle school show choir music director, Molly Priest. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Okay, passes 4-0. Next up is probably the main item for tonight, which is the approving. So you may recall, we've been through a process now for a couple of years. And we all had a chance to comment about a month ago on the DEI plan, and other people had a chance to comment. And so we're being presented the final form with an opportunity to approve it. Meredith, you want to give us some
Yeah.
background?
As Brian said, we've been on the feedback rounds with our draft that came out of the DEI leadership team of our equity action plan. We started with the board back in our, I think, it was our second August meeting, and then had feedback rounds with parents, with staff, and with students. And what that all resulted in, I think, is a better product. And so I just want to kind of orient you to how we've updated this and what we're showing you tonight. The only place where we aren't showing the markup is on this cover page. And it's just in a program that's really difficult to do that in. So I just want to tell you what's different on this first page. And actually, everything that's different on this first page is shown in markup form somewhere else in the document. But two things in the culture represents paragraph that's kind of mid-page. We added disability as one of the marginalized groups or groups that represent cultural diversity. And then also change that last sentence. I think Mark brought it up when we met, that individuals don't have culture, but or individuals don't make up culture, but they have cultural identities. So we restructured that sentence to accommodate for that. Great feedback. And the other thing was we adjusted the wording of one of our action strategies under cultural consciousness and competency. That first one that says grow through exploration of and celebration of diversity in our community. It previously read learn about and celebrate diversity of our in our community. And the feedback was that seems kind of just too narrow and like it's an event. We're going to go to this and learn about it and kind of be done, and grow, the word grow indicates more an ongoing process. So that's all that was changed on this first page. Susan, please speak up if I've missed something. And then generally speaking, we tried to go through and define acronyms or where we had abbreviated, just spell things out. So you'll see on this, like on this first page, that's what's listed there. In the culture paragraph, I already mentioned what changed there. And we also just, alphabetized the list of culture categories that we listed there. On page 4, we just spelled out the names of the schools to begin with there. On page 5, this gets into kind of some of the heart of the feedback about the action priorities and strategies. We had some great feedback on all of these, and some of the feedback we got were more questions about implementation that really for us doesn't belong in the action plan, but more kind of feedback that will funnel over to our work groups when we get started on certain activities. But there were other types of feedback that we felt we wanted to incorporate into the plan, like using our district-wide emails that is an existing system to communicate about this. Someone mentioned that was missing. And we also got some feedback about co and extracurricular programming that really wasn't mentioned in here. It was implied more by some wording that we were doing, but we thought it was important to explicitly list it. And so we listed it in a couple of places, and this is one of them here under communication plan, where we list targeted communication to that group of staff. Everything else there is just spelling things out a little more. Going to page 9, I think we had some good feedback from a couple of sources, one of which was at the board meeting when we were talking about surveying. So we just tried to be a little more explicit there about what our intentions were, what we planned on studying and how we planned on, who we plan on reaching out to. So that's what you see there for key steps 1 and 2. On page 10, that's where we adjusted the action strategy language to reflect more of a growth mindset with that as opposed to a learning event. And on page 11 with our cultural consciousness and competency action strategy around engagement in the exploration of that topic, we explicitly added including co-curricular and extracurricular staff, because that's a real challenge for us. And we think just writing it there helps hold us accountable to stepping up to that challenge. And so you see that there. And I believe everything else is just, spelling out acronyms and such. So that those are the updates to the plan. And in addition to that, to what you see here, we have a work in progress glossary started. It's going to take us a little more time to get that done because, it wasn't as straightforward as it may seem to develop glossary definitions for some terms that we identified. But I think it's going to really be a nice addition to the plan. And I guess it's kind of a question in that, would you like us to bring back the glossary for you to review and kind of approve as an amendment to the plan? Or are you comfortable with that sitting with the DEI leadership team to be the body that does a kind of review and feedback of that? So that's one question.
I mean, we have representatives on the DI leadership. I'd personally be comfortable leaving that to the leadership team. For people.
And the other thing that's in progress, well, it's not actually in progress yet, it will soon be in progress, is developing a timeline that's a little more of a consolidated timeline, because we have time listed on each of the pages for key priorities, but we really think we need to have it in one place so we can use that to really pace our work. Because, if on page 10, it says we're going to start this in August, and on page 3, it says we're going to start it in August. Can we do both of those in August? So we really plan on doing a better consolidated timeline. And that's work that we're going to do with the leadership team. Our next leadership team meeting, I'm just kind of giving you a full picture before you consider adoption. Our next leadership team meeting is a week from yesterday, so Monday, next Monday. And at that meeting, we're going to be primarily working on organizing the group into subcommittees to begin work. We've already started some work, but to begin using that group's leadership to help lead us into the next phase and in some places start some of the activities. So we've identified 5 work groups that are going to get started that will be working on different aspects of the plan and pulling in some other members of the school community really to help on those work committees as well. So that's where we are. And we feel really good about where the equity action plan is right now, and that it will help continue to move us forward with the work. But we also don't see it as something that's static. It's something that we'll need to continue to refine, revisit, update as we move forward and learn more. Susan has been leading us in a lot of this work. So I just want to ask Susan, do you have anything to add to that before the board asks questions?
No, I think you did a nice job covering the changes. Thanks. I'm glad that you did mention that it won't be a static plan. I'm already learning a lot of new things like, oh, I wish I knew that when we wrote that section. So I think we'll have to come back and revisit it for sure at some point, but I think it's a good document.
So questions?
I'd like to commend the committee for, it seems to me to be in great shape. The only question I had, and I don't know, and this is coming from someone who normally doesn't really worry about these things, but I do wonder if there's a little bit of survey overload in here. So, I don't necessarily think it has to be something that is dealt with now, but it does, there's a lot of surveying going on.
And one of the work groups is on it's not the survey work group. It's the one that's going to take up the task of that rigorous examination of our schools and collection of data. So, one of those will be, I'm sure, surveying, but also focus groups and pulling other data that exists together to help us conduct that examination. And one thing Susan and I have talked about is if any other group feels like they need to collect data or run a survey, that it really needs to go through that group, so we're not stepping on to, all over one another, trying to do surveys all at once in different ways. So I think having one group that's going to be responsible for data collection will be helpful. But I completely agree with your assessment in terms of evaluating and I think it's a good, it's really the way you're supposed to write these plans, right? To have an evaluative component. So many times our evaluation is to collect, perceptions through surveys. So I think some of the surveys will be kind of down the line surveys after we've done some of the work, and then we'll survey on effectiveness. And then there are other surveys we really need to do, and data collection we need to do up front to really define, what do we need to do about safety in our schools. And that's really an upfront data collection to then inform the work that needs to follow.
So Mark, I agree about survey fatigue, and I probably have been somebody historically who's worried about it a lot. My sense though is the trend is people are more and more happy to engage through surveys. I mean, just looking at response numbers, I don't know if you have a thought about that, but
Well, nationally, if you look at the kind of survey research industry, the trend's been in the other direction. It's one of the huge problems of polling right now, at least in the political realm, is that it's getting increasingly difficult to get people to engage, right? That could be different here. It could also be in the case of the awards survey, that it was something that students and parents were pretty interested in. I mean, generally, the more interested people are in a topic, the more willing they are to complete a survey. But as a general rule, the more you survey any given population, the less willing they are to participate. And we already, meaning us, the board, already surveys the same population more or less quite a bit throughout the year. And I don't know that we're looking to get rid of any of the surveys that we're doing. Some of them are required by policy, right? And we can always change policy, but and again, I'm as a quantitative researcher, I'm all in favor of surveys. I just wonder if in this instance, that group you're talking about might take a look at, are there some alternative data gathering efforts that they can do to take the place of some of these surveys and not lose any effectiveness, right? Maybe the answer to that is no, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, for example, would be the benefit or cost of for classrooms doing a paper survey in class instead of students online.
Yeah.
I mean, to reach parents and staff, you're going to have to go online, but I don't know.
I mean, we know for sure, given, like, when you look at our course evaluations, ever since we went online, the numbers have gone down. I mean, you've got a captive audience, they fill out the survey.
If you give people 5 minutes of class time to do a survey, they'll do the survey.
Generally speaking, yes.
Well, I mean, I think that committee is the right place to wrestle with the issue. So
Any other questions or comments?
I just second what Mark would say. There's been a lot of work that's gone into it, and it seems well thought out, well executed, and well presented. So thank you.
yeah, I mean, I also, this is a lot of work, but I don't know, makes me feel proud of the district. It feels like a real substantial commitment to the issue, which at a time where we, construction and COVID and a lot of other things were going on. So I appreciate being in a district where everybody from senior administration down to a lot of staff to a lot of parents and students took the time and energy to make this an excellent effort.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm proud about is that it represents really our work. This isn't a template that we, borrowed from someone else's strategic plan on this topic and just tweaked it a little. We really generated it from the bottom up, and it is reflecting what we see as needs and how we can grow as a school district. So
Okay, I would make a motion to adopt the RSU 26 Equity Action Plan as presented with the full enthusiasm and commitment of the board. Is there a second?
And a second.
Any discussion or comments? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. That's a nice milestone and a lot of work. Next up is the donation. You want to present that, Meredith?
Yes, we have a rather sizable donation from 3 classes that had the multi-class reunion class of 1970, 71, and 72. Did fundraising as part of their reunion and raised $1,972. I think that's a coincidence, but I don't know. And they are contributing that to the football program to honor one of their classmates, Bob Sinclair, who is longtime coach in our program. And so we request that you authorize us to receive these funds.
So I'm all in favor of honoring Bob and accepting the funds, but where is the funds? Actually, it's not like we have a football endowment. So where does the fund actually go?
Let me think about this. It depends on what we'll probably put it in there in the high school internal account for athletics that's earmarked for football.
Okay.
Yeah. Not the budget. That doesn't make a sense to put it
Right.
there.
Yeah. I would make a motion to authorize the acceptance of the gift with gratitude. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or comments? And certainly I appreciate the spirit of recognizing Bob. Bob's been through football, but through his assistant principal, he's been a mainstay of this district for a long time. So all those in favor? Passes 4-0. Next up, we have policies. These are all outcomes. Well, most of the outcomes of our ongoing review of policies, although a couple of these chase back to legislative changes. So IHA district curriculum. This is a pretty new policy, but it's already been adopted as a policy. These are updates that came through our revolving review process. We decided to get rid of K through 12 because that language is always changing, right? We have pre-K now and we may have more in the future. We decided we should go ahead and list the categories of main learning results and guiding principles. That's just straight out of the main law. But figured since this is now becoming a central document, people can check in against about curricular requirements, that's useful. We added another law that was included, some typos fixed, and that's it. So I would make a motion to approve policy IHA to approve the revisions to policy IHA as presented. Is there a second?
My second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Okay, 4-0. Next up is policy JKFC. IKFC, the Alternative Education Program. So there's a separate policy IKF, which is graduation requirements in general. And this is sort of like, it's almost a sub policy because it specifically expands out the graduation requirements for students going through the Alternative Education Program. This was developed in consultation between the policy subcommittee and the Alternative Education teaching staff. So has their full, blessing. And Meredith and I did check with the changes to the law, and it feels like it's up to date with everything that's been said. There were some legal changes to the law pertaining to this, so it feels like it's up to date to that. So, somewhat substantial additions, but it's been through a very robust process. Everybody's on board and it's compliant with the new law. So I would make a motion to recognize the revisions to policy IKFC as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. Policy JEA. This one has been kicking around. There were state mandates to update it couple of years ago, but we were waiting for some environmental Woodsum language, which we never got our hands on. So we finally decided it was time to just update it. Main changes, and this is just reflecting state law. It used to be you did not have to attend school until 7th grade at year 7, age of 7 at parents' choice, but that's now age 6. There is also, you are not required to send a child to school at age 5. However, if you do start them in school, you can't just stop showing up. You have to officially unenroll them if you want them to not go from, say, age 5.5 to 6. So that language is all reflected to accept the current state law. And we also thought, given that we have students who, have a major health issue or surgery or something and are attending remotely, which is something we now know how to do well, we need something in the policy to recognize that status. So it still requires principal approval and or an IEP or 504 plan. Those are all the changes. So I would make a motion to adopt the revisions to policy JEA as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
I guess I jumped JLCD, but we'll get there in a minute. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Okay, passes 4-0. And JLCD, the administration of medication to students. There are quite a few laws on that. So one change, and this is a request from the administration, which the policy committee supported, is to allow the school nurse to have naloxone, which is the overdose drug, in case there's an overdose. I didn't know what a collaborative practice agreement is. We had to look it up, but it's basically a generic prescription from a pharmacist that's used at the judgment of the school nurse. It's not in other words, it's not a named prescription. So it basically allows the nurse to obtain one of these generic prescriptions and to use it at her, potentially in the future, his judgment, in an emergency situation. Some typos cleaned up.
It's also, we plan on having that in every school office. And so we worded it the nurse or designated training school personnel. So we would have training for probably, a couple of people in each school office to be able to administer. And just for clarity, that is Narcan is the name, that's the prescription name, but that's the name of the drug. And Karen says that a lot of schools have been shifting to this and that there's training available for schools that are implementing this.
Yep, thanks. That was a good clarification. Some update to gender pronouns. And the other change, and this is matching state law change, is older students with principal and nurses' permission are allowed to carry and self-administer emergency meds, mainly EpiPens and asthma inhalers. And the state law now extends that to include diabetes management, so insulin in particular, as well as probably testing devices. So we are matching the state law on that. So I would make a motion to approve revisions to policy JLCD as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. Next up, subcommittee reports. Policy subcommittee, we met 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago. This is the output. As you can see, we're really caught up with both state law changes and with pressing needs in the district. So we're really just working through a review process. And we might well get through it this year. I think, has it been 3 years we've been doing this, Mark? So we'll be right on schedule to start over at the A's again.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be a 3-year review by policy. And, in some cases, we've made very little changes, like getting rid of Riverside RSU 26 and, less little changes like gender pronouns. And in some cases, the discussions actually led to some substantial changes. So it's been a good process, I think. So yeah. Next up on the policy subcommittee is just the next set of policies alphabetically. Anything from UTC?
I wasn't able to make the meeting.
Okay. Anything from Spruce?
No forthcoming meeting date at this point. I imagine that'll change
Curriculum Subcommittee has met since the last time the board met. Susan, you want to give an overview on that?
Sure, thank you. Yep, we met last week and much of our conversation centered around the curriculum committee members giving feedback on a template that we will use to expand our current curriculum maps to include some other important areas and the work process for beginning that. I found the feedback really helpful and we'll adjust the template some based on that feedback and start trying it out with health on November 1st. Another portion of our conversation was about the specificity of how detailed our documents need to be. So someplace between the lesson plan and the main learning results, and just helping staff, teachers in particular, be more comfortable with that as we move into that work and do that work together. And I really am glad that we have a template to use and a real clear direction of what we want to include, and know that the work will be a bit messy getting there, but it's good to know where we want to go, and it's much easier to get there. And our next meeting is the 10th of November. And I know the Instructional Technology Committee has some work that they would like to get some feedback from the Curriculum Committee regarding before that comes to the board. And we'll probably take a look at some rubrics that we can use to assess our curriculum and our standards for cultural inclusiveness and responsiveness.
Thank you. And just to remind the board, part of what's being set up is this revolving 4 or 5 year process to do curriculum updates through each of our subject areas. And the 2 on tap for this year are health in the fall and math starting a little bit further behind, but also going through this year. So, you know, on the one hand, it's starting health, but there was also a discussion, as Susan said, about the basic template that we're expecting to carry through for everything. And the big discussion was, well, what happens if, you know, there's a snow day and I don't teach that? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everybody walked away, as you said, with an understanding that we're not trying to make a public document that's committing teachers down at that level of detail, but we do want to see something more than just the main learning standards bullet points. So that was a lot of the conversation. Facilities and Building Committee. I mean, you heard most of the update in the superintendent report.
Yeah, we're meeting next Tuesday to discuss the feedback we've got on our 4 self-managed projects and to consider that information. And, you know, the spoiler is that they are more than the money we have to spend. So we have to figure out what to do about that. And so that's what that committee will be discussing, and we'll bring the information back to the board following that meeting.
That's working with Haley Ward. They have, you know, they have nice drawings of all 4 of our self-managed projects at this point, but yeah, with the way.
With nice price tags.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, they haven't gold plated by any stretch, but price of construction, I think they said it's been up about 50% in the last couple of years. So
You got so lucky you got that bond out.
I know,
we sure did.
so-
And we got a bid out
Yeah,
before.
that would just been such a disaster.
Yeah. Wellness Committee, Noah's not here.
I know they're scheduling a second meeting for sometime in the next couple of weeks.
DEI leadership, and you saw the main output from that, and they're meeting again to dive into details next week. Any other business? Any requests for future agenda items?
One thing that I just wanted to, that's probably not the time to say it. Maybe it is. You and I talked about that data workshop wasn't on our list of fall
Right.
topics. And so Brian and I thought that the November 15th meeting, which is when we had some flexibility in that meeting date, would probably need to be the meeting we tagged for data workshop. And I think the question is, do we want to have 5 o'clock or 4:30 is usually what we do for data workshop. So we have a little more dedicated time for that. That's what we've done the past few times, and I think everyone likes that a little better. So thoughts?
I teach until 2:45 on Tuesdays, I mean 4:45.
Oh, okay.
So I would be,
It'd be hard to do.
I'd be late.
We don't have to do that. We can do it in the context of the meeting.
I mean, I do like the earlier time. I wonder if we could start at 5 and start the school board meeting at 6:30.
What's the rest of that meeting look like? I know it's
We don't have a special topic that night.
good.
That's the one meeting that we did not have a special topic.
I mean, I'm fine either way. I think I like the earlier start time too, but I don't want to make it so that Kevin can't attend. So whichever way works for everybody else is fine.
Is 5 gonna, I mean, it's gonna rush you, but
If it's not raining, I have a little electric scooter. I can, so I get to the Equity Leadership meeting, I can zip across town. I gotta, you know, if I'm a couple minutes late, you'll miss my brilliant insights, but I'm sure you'll manage.
Yeah.
okay.
I can shoot for 5.
So 5 and then 6:30, just start the regularly scheduled meeting at 6:30.
Sure.
I do think with the data workshop, it helps to have a clear separation
It
between the
does.
public meeting and the data workshop. So any other requests for information or follow-up? Or for future agenda items? Any public comment? Not seeing anybody unmuting to public comment, so we'll go ahead and move on. Our next meeting is November 1st at 6 p.m. Recall that we'll have a dedicated public comment sub period for awards, and there will be a staff admin presentation around awards, and the board will have discussion around awards that meeting. And that's kind of been advertised in public at this point for a month or more, so no idea what kind of response we'll get. I will analyze now that the survey's been closed. I'm not doing any deep analysis, mostly just breaking out student, staff and parent into separate categories, but which Google Forms doesn't do naturally. So I'll get that out to people in the next couple of days. Oh, on that topic, I think Noah in particular is others, so maybe I follow up with email, but keeps referencing some literature. I personally would find it, if somebody has a piece of literature that they think is very telling on this topic, I would find it helpful to have that literature in advance too. So maybe I'll mention that to Noah, but anybody else that thinks there's literature that bears on this, that would be helpful.
Do we think that most attendees will attend remotely, or should we consider another location?
You just want to be in the DAC.
I do.
She already is.
Actually,
Look at her screen.
yes. Actually, that's probably, well, they're doing their rehearsals earlier, but
Right.
we might consider the cafeteria.
I was gonna say would it be possible, how much of a problem would it be if we were set up here and then enough people came to move there, or should we just plan that meeting for there? And that's really a tech question, right?
I mean, it's, we could have a board over in there ready. In which space, the cafeteria?
Cafeteria. I mean, I don't think we need to go to PAC for it. I don't think it's gonna be that size of a crowd, but I do think there'll be. I mean, right now we've got a public of 2, right?
I would just, well, I need to see if there's something else in there that night, because there's a group that, I don't think they're started yet, though.
I mean, we
Yeah,
could
so
make
I
this,
think
we could make
we-
this space more conducive. We could back that screen up and go back to kind of the normal setup in here. It would be.
Let me just look at the calendar and consider that, and Brian and I will make a call on that.
I do think if we're gonna get people back in person, that might be something that could do the trick.
That would be the meeting this fall, and I could be wrong either way, and I'm always happy when people show up. If I had to bet, if we had that table and some chairs, I thought we wouldn't exceed that. I had a lot of people are pretty happy with remote
Yes,
participation.
people have
at this
gotten
point.
used to being on Zoom.
Cook dinner and feed their kids while they watch school board and
Right.
comment, so. Okay. Any requests for information or follow-up? I had one, I'll just mention it, but I can follow up with you. And I don't know what the right time or format is, but I'd be curious to hear more about the NEASC now that the final report's done, what the high school decided they're working on.
That, yes, that was in our plans. The high school staff is taking their first look at it and discussion of it this week, right, in faculty meeting. So we plan to bring that back to the board after the vision of graduate training that the group is going to. So we can talk about timing and that might fit and work best.
Sounds good. Any other requests for information or follow-up? Okay, so we deleted the board professional development. So next up is an executive session. I would make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056D, labor negotiations. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion about the executive session? All those in favor of going in? That passes 4-0. And we won't be voting no or on anything except adjournment afterwards, so you're all welcome to head out. Thank you for attending.